That is such a big world. And I'm talking about this now because, not to be a prophet, I don't want to be right about this stuff. It's not about who's saying it. This is just how it is. This is a lesson we learned, and we can't let it be wasted. We cannot let this be wasted. Because even though Don Cornette is whole, I assure you, he's fine. I checked. Bob Van Brocklin isn't. Hasn't been since 93. What it takes for you to blow your own head off is a lot. And I've had suicide in my own family, and it's just not a legacy anybody wants to leave, especially someone who is who is strong and independent and has made this world. And my pops always said, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I can agree with him. I mean, it is, and he's had it cross his path more times than anyone should have to deal with. But what's happening in the Gulf right now doesn't seem temporary. It doesn't seem to have an end in sight. It does not seem to have a solution. It doesn't seem to have anyone stepping up to say, there is going to be an end to this. I don't know that the president understands what happens to people. But we do. And he should be responding to this part of the human crisis right now, because it's invisible. The despair and the hope and all of this is invisible. It's just there. And in the meantime, there are bottlenose dolphins washing in to shore, and there are turtles burning alive in these corrals of oil that are being burnt. These turtles are coming to the top and being burnt, and there are fish just boiling in the water to the top and dying because they don't have any oxygen in the water. And there's birds covered with oil, and you can see all of this in tar balls washing in, and the marshes and the swamps and all of this. It's so visible, and the pictures are so devastating to look at. And if you look at them long enough, you can smell dispersants in your own mind. You can just, it's horrible to look at, but it's all visual. But the despair that people are feeling is invisible, and yet it is just as corrosive, if not more so, if you can even say that. There's some comments, and I know people are reading these over at the Mudflats right now and at shannonmoore.com. And, last year, actually a couple years ago, I wrote an article about a soldier who was from Soldotna, who was killed in Afghanistan. And I wrote in there, I just read this young man's name, and I don't know what team he cheered for. I don't know what he ordered on pizza. I don't know who he was. He was 21 years old and killed. And I said, every time I read one of these names, I want to know those answers. I want to know who this was. This has to be real. It can't just be a name. Every single name, whether it's William Allen Cruz, who killed himself yesterday over despair of the spill, or it's a soldier who's coming back, every single one of these names somebody picked out. Somebody had a baby and they picked out a name and they named him after somebody, or after a character in a book, or a song that they loved, or a hero of theirs, or they just liked the name and they looked it up in the book of 5,000 names and it didn't mean something horrible and doesn't rhyme with something that someone's going to tease them with on the school bus. Every one of these names are real, right? So it's a year and a half after I wrote this about this young man, I get an email from his fiancée, and she answered all those questions. And she told me what he ordered on his pizza. And she answered all these questions, and she said, I haven't even been able to Google his name, but I read the comments from people who read your article, who poured out this sorrow. And she said, a sorrow that I couldn't even read yet, but now that I am, and I am healing, these words have meant everything to me. So I'm only talking about this because I don't want it to happen again.
She looked across the blackened sound, broken-hearted at what she found. Her home, her family, everything she knew had been covered in the black and crude. She said, ooh. Thoughts she tried to pace. What was the future and how could she raise a family on what used to be? She said, ooh. Visions of dying otters, fish and birds filled her mind, and the cries she heard. Oiled bodies and tortured souls, corporate profits had taken their toll. She said, ooh.